Good afternoon, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael. The damage reports are still coming in, but as of this morning, agricultural damage from July's flooding has now climbed above $12 million. We have a statewide snapshot released this morning by the Agency of Agriculture, and I just want to be clear that this is reported damage. The agency is expecting that these numbers will climb as more farmers report to the agency. The number of farms impacted and reporting now stands at 205. Collectively, those farms have reported estimated losses of nearly $12.3 million. The survey results show the total impacted acreage at just over 18,000, and the 205 reporting farms, they're estimating they've lost on average 30% of their annual income. To shed more light on the damage to Vermont's farming sector, I'm joined by Abby Willard. Abby is the Director of Agriculture Development for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Good afternoon, Abby. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome, Will.
So one of the mantras this afternoon is going to be go and take the survey. We're going to have links to that. But what's the headline or headlines out of the survey that you're seeing this Monday afternoon?
Yeah. So Vermont farmers were hit just like residents and businesses throughout Vermont. And so it's really important to encourage farmers to go to vermont.agriculture.gov to complete the survey. The goal of the survey is to demonstrate the impact on farms across the state, to demonstrate what their greatest losses were, see what the magnitude of impact was, so both the sales lost as well as the acres impacted, and then just the distribution of what the losses were. Was it in crops? Was it in loss of infrastructure, damage to tractors or equipment or other land resources?
So this survey is open, as I understand it, for another couple of weeks. It's open through the 28th, and the agency, again, is encouraging anyone has any damage. This is related to flooding.
Right.
It is not related, as I understand it, to events, frost damage and things like that occurred early. There are other avenues for that. We're not closing the door on that. But again, our director, John Walker, throughout the program will put the information up regarding the survey. So how can farmers respond, Abby, and what are the questions? What do they need to have either in front of them, or what are the information they're going to be asked for?
Yeah, so the survey's pretty simple. It should take no more than, I think we said 7 to 10 minutes to complete. So it should be a lot of the same information that farms are already sharing with their lenders or with their insurance agent. So it should be readily available information that just includes their address, what county they're located in, the name of their farm business, their primary point of contact within the business, what type of damage they experienced, again, whether it was in the field or it was infrastructure or crops. We ask a few questions around crop insurance, trying to get a sense of how many of the farmers have access to crop insurance coverage or don't.
And a quick headline there, some of the initial data is showing that the news somewhat gets worse. I'm seeing on this little dashboard that we've set up for you here, the respondents so far, a majority do not have crop or flood insurance.
Right, so far, and again, this is an iterative dashboard, it's updating every day. 69% of responding farms do not currently have crop insurance, which means they're really relying upon other state and federal and philanthropic and local resources to help them respond to the damages that they've incurred.
So I think something that the general public is interested in, certainly the farming community, is the survey information that is broken down by county for agricultural damages. Again, our director, John Walker, has put together that information, and as he puts it up, share some of these survey results, what they're telling the agency to date.
Yeah, I would say so far the top kind of reported damaged counties in Vermont due to agriculture would be Addison, Chittenden, Bennington, and Lamoille. And that's a wide distribution across the state. 13 out of 14 counties have demonstrated losses. But you could probably take those top 4 reported counties for agriculture and attribute those to some of the same communities that experienced kind of downtown other business damage. So, Montpelier or Ludlow or Johnson, some of those same communities were also hard hit by this flood. And that was what was challenging. It was a non-discerning flood event throughout July.
Speaking of non-discerning, dairy impacted as much as our fruit and vegetable berry growers? In other words, is there a split here between dairy and produce, or
Yeah,
not?
it's a good question, Will, and I think when you look at the dashboard, you'll see one of the questions speaks to which aspects of your operation were most heavily impacted by the flood. And it currently is a pretty even distribution between crops that were intended for wholesale or retail markets, so that would be, food likely. So that could be dairy, but it could also be produce or berries or other annual crops. And then about an equal distribution of animal feed and forage crops that were lost. So that would be our corn and soybeans, pasture land, hay ground.
You told me as we were preparing for the program, you gave me an analogy of a produce farm, that they not only lost the things in the store, but they lost the stuff that was out back and getting ready to come in. Can you expand on that a little bit? Let's talk specifically about produce for just a moment in terms of how these farms have been impacted.
Yeah, we've done a lot of comparison of this July flooding event with Irene, and one of the major differences for the produce community in particular, as well as our forage crop industry, is the timing. So it was right in July. Many produce operations that lost everything had invested all the labor and the cost and the inputs into their crop, and they were just getting ready to head to market and start to redeem some of that hard labor and contributions towards revenue and sales when the flood events hit. And so many produce operations lost all of their crops. Many are continuing to watch their crops through saturated soils rot in the fields and not be saleable, and anything that was edible, intended for human consumption, that was flooded was harvested and pitched. So it was terrible timing for the produce industry, and many of those alluvial soils that sit in those floodplain or lowland areas were heavily hit by this event.
The catch-22 of what makes them great soils to grow things in. So can I take you back just for a moment to the most common damages that were being reported? And as of this morning, near the top is the loss of crops meant for wholesale or retail markets. Is that only produce, or that's also, what is that? Is it solely food for human consumption, or is it that category broader than that?
That would be for human consumption. So that could include our dairy industry as well as our produce industry, our apples, our berries, could be our wine and grape industry that was heavily impacted. And that loss of market is very concerning. So not only did they lose the crops, but they also may lose their place in the marketplace. And that's always very concerning from the long-term perspective of those markets of wholesale and retail markets had to find an alternate source. And we hope that they return to the Vermont producers that weren't able to provide it this season.
So we're seeing again from those who have reported the loss of crops meant for food, for forage, for wholesale, for retail. There's damage to soil. There is a minor silver lining, if I may, that there wasn't that much damage, or there hasn't been that much damage yet reported to equipment, machinery, and buildings, if I have that right. Is that fair?
Yeah, so I think the current dashboard demonstrates 7% of reported farms said that the most significant damage to their operation was to infrastructure or equipment. So that could mean that they may have lost some equipment or infrastructure, but it was less impactful as to what they experienced in the loss of crops, for example.
Well, I've forewarned our viewers that we're going to put up the survey information a number of times throughout the program, because we can't underscore the importance enough of responding to agriculture.vermont.gov. If you need a paper version, you can call the number at the bottom of your screen, 802-636-7793. And I'm also going to point out that there are links specifically to Spanish on the website. And again, if you need any other help, we're going to encourage you to call that number, any questions at all, because it is critically important. Correct, Abby? If I'm wrong, you'll correct me. We need people to report to the survey. That's what helps draw down funds. That's what gets energy and action where it needs to be going. Yeah,
so the primary intent of this state survey is to capture the magnitude of the impact and then use this data to help generate access to more state and federal resources to help support businesses through this transition and recovery time.
Physical damage is one thing. It's much more difficult to measure the mental health and the stress that this has occurred, that has occurred for everyone. The agency has support there. This is something that we've talked about in non-emergency situations, but in this situation, for the stress, the distress, the mental health, what can the agency do to help support our farming community?
Yeah, I'm glad we're focusing on this piece, because I think it's a devastating loss to lose your business, your home, your inventory of crops and revenue for the upcoming season. And we've heard from farms that are really questioning whether they're going to continue to farm into the future. And that's a devastating set of choices to be facing as a small business or even a larger business in Vermont. And so looking at what resources are available to have some of those conversations is really critical. So Farm First has been an ongoing resource for the ag community to be able to consult with a consultant, a counselor of a type, or engage with a peer network of farmers.
Peer network, yes.
And so both are available and both are encouraged, and actually waiting to hear from farmers that are contemplating tough choices or just struggling through the day, whichever it might be, and encourage them to reach out to Farm First advisors that are there.
Abby, I've got about a minute left in the program. The agency has put together a task force, representative chaired by Dr. Roy Beckford of UVM Extension, as well as a member of the agency. You are on that task force. Quickly, what are the expectations? What needs to happen?
Yeah, so the Ag Recovery Task Force is designed to really coordinate efforts across the state, which is something Vermont's really good at. So this is a really important opportunity to make the case for how do we bring more state and federal resources into the state? How do we help message the importance of buying local and making sure at all times, but especially now, to support your local farmers if we want to see a maintained open working landscape as well as food security in this state? And then help us plan for the future and being climate smart as we continue to rebuild.
And the farming community can do that one last time to be sure that they go to agriculture.vermont.gov, fill out the survey, takes a few minutes, send it in, and that's going to help all of us as we move forward. Abby, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks, Will.
That is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit across the fence.